Welcome everybody to 52 Living Ideas. I'm delighted to have my friend Yasuhiko back. And today I'm really fascinated with this topic. As always, he always comes up with something next time which blows me away. So Yasuhiko, the floor is all yours, sir.
Good morning. So this is the fourth in the series of New Spirituality of the Future. And today I'm going to talk about two things. One is the origin of new consciousness in the breakdown of the egological mind. And second, following that, the healing of the self and the healing of the world. And you just told me that your group has studied Julian Jaynes' origin of consciousness in the breakdown of the bicameral mind. Did you say 30 sessions?
Yes, give or take 5 to 10.
Oh, I see. Okay. That's one of the most stimulating books I've ever read. In 1984, I came across 3 books that really changed my, opened up a new avenues of thinking. And one is Bakumisafura's Synergetics #1. The other one is Ayn Rand's Atlas Shrugged. And this Julian Jaynes, The Origin of Consciousness in the Breakdown of the Bicameral Mind. And Julian Jaynes postulate that what I call egological consciousness, which he calls consciousness, was the new mental operating system emerged as a result of evolutionary challenge and stress brought about by the greater complexification of society. And of course, there is always internal inner will to power, the will to evolve, will to realize its potential. And then when environment poses a challenge, those internal thrust for evolution and external challenge come together. And when we succeed, we evolve. And he says 3,000 years ago, that happened. So there's a reason why I call this egological consciousness, and I will talk about this later. So this last 3,000 years, if we just accept his postulate, hypothesis, has been the egological movement. So the last 3,000 years has been the human development. We can call the egological movement. And so the birth of new consciousness and new spirituality that we are talking about, we can call trans-ecological movement. And spiritual masters who achieved enlightenment in the past, that you can also say kind of trans-ecological movement. But the one I'm talking about is of a scale and the depths and scope of a different character. So this particular section of my presentation, we can call this origin of new consciousness in the breakdown of the egological mind. But before we talk about this breakdown of the egological mind, we want to look at how Julian Jaynes characterized this egological mind and egological consciousness. And as you know, he listed about 6 features, major features. That is the design principle of this operating system, which we call consciousness or egological consciousness. One is spatialization of time. So long before Albert Einstein and Minkowski, human learned to spatialize time so we can see in past, present, and the future. Second is what he called excerption, which is like a selection, because there's so much sensory and perceptual input coming into our consciousness. You actually select and excerpt whatever you consider to be relevant. Ayn Rand, in her introduction to objective epistemology, she talks about something similar. She calls it omission. So we do excerpt, we do select, and we omit other sensory. That is another aspect of this consciousness. And this consciousness, unlike the bicameral mind, developed the self, I, as an analog, physical analog. So perceptually, we can see this body moving around in the space. So the I is a metaphysical analog of this physical body, which moves along with this body wherever it goes, and also it moves in the metaphysical space of language. And then metaphor, me, it is the collection of identities which you consider to be you. I used to use the word constellation of floating identities. And Gurujev has a notion of a society of personalities. So when I say me, there's an element, you have the collection of identities which you consider to be yourself. Then another feature that he has is narratization. So human consciousness is a story maker. And you understand reality through stories. And physical science theories are form of narration. Theory and theater come from the same root. So it is really a storytelling. And the last is what he called the conciliation. Although he said at one point, he says, compatibilization is better term, but it is a kind of strange word. So he used a conciliation. So what means in the process of narration, if there are contradictions, somehow we find a way to make it consistent. So that is the operating system that we developed when the society and the human interactions became so complex that the bicameral mind could not handle anymore. Because bicameral mind is based entirely on the past. Right hemisphere is like a reservoir of the past, telling the left brain what to do. And when new situation arises, the bicameral mind is not equipped to deal with this. So we develop this new kind of consciousness. That's what he says. What happened? Since the late 18th century, before and around the time of American and French Revolution, when the first wave of Industrial Revolution came into existence, humans' lifestyle changed and society became increasingly more complex. And we are still in that wave. Today, it is called Fourth Industrial Revolution. And at every phase of this Industrial Revolution, our lifestyle changed and complexity of society increased. And the egological mind has been having breakdowns ever since. So when you read philosophers, probably starting from Schopenhauer, but most clearly Nietzsche, he really represents the breakdown and the breakthrough in his own way of moving from limitation of ecological mind to a trans-ecological mode of consciousness. And in Nietzsche's term for trans-ecological human is Übermensch, sometimes called Superman, sometimes called Overman, is superior humans that has transcended monological, egological mentality and ongoingly overcoming its own limitations so that it is moving into a new mode of humans. So Overman, you know, it is in the Zarathustra, it is a child. There is no actual final destination, but it's categorically different from the egologically confined humans. So choice we have today is whether you become the child, a child in the three transformations of camel, lion, and child, and continue to self-overcome on our way to become Übermensch. And this is a trans-ecological movement. And eventually, we will have qualitatively different kind of humans that can emerge. Or we remain, we just be comfortable and be the last man. The last man is basically this people who conspire with mediocrity. They are like not even a camel in a serious sense, or at least a camel with only one bag. Take it easy. Not really moving steadily with light load and hanging around the oasis and having a nice conversation with the other you know, last man.
Yasuhiko,
Yes.
may I ask a question or make a comment? I love the parallels you're drawing between Jaynes and today's time.
Yeah.
The breakdown there, I mean, the context there was that everything people knew that was supporting their life,
Yes.
all the stories, all the ideas, all the people, all the systems,
Yes.
fallen apart, were no longer, they could not live anymore.
Exactly. Yes.
Before that time, they could.
Yes.
And that's why they did. But suddenly the change, it's a profound change. And that is something that is triggering the, that is the context. And the change that we're going through now, I mean, it is truly mind-boggling. You know, it's like, and all this change happens like the frog in the boiling water. It happens, you know, it keeps on, the temperature keeps rising. But if you look at today's world and the technology today and how much of the systems that people are counting on no longer are viable. They're dying, you know, year by year, month by month, day by day. And everything is changing. And so it's a fantastic parallel of saying that it's same kind of situation.
Yes.
So go ahead, sir.
Yes. So exactly. I can really see the parallel. And it may be the best way to frame this, what is going on. And in that sense, we can also see that, when the organism or system collapses, it hypertrophies and it becomes an extreme. It is a deformation, but at the same time, the extreme formation of what it is. And we are seeing that deformation, hypertrophy, and we are reacting to hypertrophy. They don't see that it is actually coming to the end. So we want to really look at the egological mind. Why I call it egological, it has a logic. And its limitations and how we are overcoming it. So the egological mind is the language or metaphor engendered mind, and hence it operates on the model of reality created through these 6 operational design of consciousness. Humans are model creators. And this model is like Alan Watts has this metaphor of menu and food. You have a menu and you have a food, or you have a map and actual, territory. So humans are model creators, and universe is modelable. And it is one of the great features of, human consciousness to be able to do that. But up to this moment, we are monological and mono-modeling. So people come up with one model and then they basically get stuck with it. It's called paradigm paralysis. Have you noticed that? Recently, maybe Ken Wilber, maybe good example. He has developed this model, integral theory model. And he stopped where, when the model developed to the certain limitation, it stopped. Now it has become a way of interpreting everything. And reality is more complex, deep, that no model can ever fully explain. And so people become more clinging to the model and the menu, and they forget there are many other dishes you can come up with. So you have a menu, and in this restaurant it is served, but there are many other food, but this menu doesn't apply to those foods. So that's number one. So the development of the egological mind consists in the development of the mental capacity for constructing and operating on a model of reality. And egological mind is model-centered, not reality or nature-centered. And at its extreme state, humanity alienates itself from reality and nature. That's what happened. Models are portal to reality. It is not reality itself. It may be part of the reality, but it is not reality itself. So my way of actually, teaching, if you can say, is I use different models so people don't get stuck in it. So look at from one model you can see this way, another model you can see this way. So you have amazing model, Shrikant, but then maybe you want to come up with something else. And it is so important not to be attached to any model. Even Albert Einstein got attached to his theory and wasn't able to see beyond his theory. So the ego logic is monologic. And this monological, essentially the Aristotelian dualism. There's one aspect of egology. There's another aspect I will talk about later. So as I said, it is like spending the entire time in a restaurant looking at the menu without ever eating the food. That's going on. Today, when people do science, they look into the computer models. You can't observe the Big Bang, so it is entirely a theory. And cosmic background radiations, there are other ways of interpreting than Big Bang and the expansion of the universe. And the ecological mind is actually in a hypnotic trance, different from that of bicameral mind. That was really hypnosis, hallucination. But the same, fundamentally same, nonetheless. When we become awake, the first thing we realize that we have been asleep. From that eye, we start to see humanity. And as Gurdjieff says, we become horrified. Majority of humans are in a hypnotic trance. They think they are awake, but it is, when you are dreaming, you don't think you are dreaming, unless you are doing lucid dreaming. So, in the past, spiritual disciplines are taught to people to become awake from this hypnotic trance. Today, we are looking at many different menus, Mostly they use iPhone or computer. So the spirituality of the ecological age consists in the transcendental awareness of consciousness in which the ecological mind operates. The spirituality of the ecological age consists of the achievement of the supra-ecological and supra-mental state of consciousness in which one is able to free oneself from the confines of the ecological mental operation. The ecological mind, for a large measure, in its operation, detained the bicameral mind, external authority orientation. The Julian Jaynes called this a vestige of bicameral mind. The difference is the ecological mind transformed the polytheistic gods of the bicameral mind and mythological mind to the monotheistic God as the absolute external authority. So trans-ecological mind movement has this element of going beyond this ecological mind. And there are a number of features of the trans-ecological mind. One is trans-paradigmatic. It is able to operate on different programming. Therefore, it is multi-perspectival. Nietzsche's contribution, in my view, he was he is the most significant philosopher of the last 200 years. His perspectivism. He invited people, and he actually demonstrated to look at things from different perspectives. Was not too concerned about the consistency. So trans-ecological mind is not monological, but multilogical. The Kurt Gödel's incomplete theorem and quantum physics paradox in physics show the limitation of the dualistic logic. Kurt Gödel showed that there is a mathematical truth which we know to be true and we can understand, but it is unprovable. Therefore, there is an element of element beyond computation in the way that human consciousness operates. And even mathematicians employs that non-computational element of human thought in understanding and, or developing or discovering actually mathematical truth. So Grothendieck's geometric or topological logic, Lupasco's quantum logic, P.D. Ouspensky's tertium organum, they are an example of multi-logical thinking, going way beyond Aristotelian Bohrian logic. So intellectually, we are already seeing trans-ecological mode of thought coming into existence at the leading edge of human thought. Another thing is that this trans-paradigmatic mind is naturally, it is multi-narratization, multi-modeling. It is not stuck with one model, obviously. Being able to see and formulate theories. So in one category, the universe of discourse, as Francois taught me, so you use dualistic logic. Then to prove a theorem, you use a dualistic logic, maybe. But if you have a universal discourse, which employs a different kind of logic, then proof of that theorem, you need to employ that logic, yes? So there are different ways of proving things also. I may be wrong, Francois will correct me later on. And also, as Albert Einstein demonstrated, now it became, space-time has become relativized. And the universe become extremely dynamic and complex. It is no longer a static Newtonian universe. Space-time itself is kind of in motion, so to speak. So this is like features of a egological mind that is, trans-ecological mind that is coming into existence. And in the leading edge of human thought, people are already utilizing this way of thinking. But at this moment, they are like geniuses. As humans move forward, it is not just the geniuses, but intelligent humans will be able to actually adapt all of those modes of thinking. Today, we study Newtonian physics in junior high school, if not elementary school. None of us are as smart as Newton, but somehow culture evolved so that we can study. Yes. So, so new consciousness that contains this trans-ecological mind is holistic. It has interaction, it has an informational, intellectual, intuitional, imaginational, and spiritual intelligence integrated. It is, you see, with the ecological mind, it is easy to stuck in the information or intellection and disregard the intuition, imagination, and spiritual intelligence. With the trans-ecological mind, it is essential for us to have all dimensions of intelligence being integrated. So you are highly intellectual, but also highly spiritual. And the second dimension of this consciousness, and this I have been sharing this idea to people who are taking my course right now, is causative. It is this consciousness stays at the ground of being. It is being at cause of reality, and it affirms absolutely what is and what isn't. Being at cause does not mean you create everything. Obviously, we haven't. But when you are being at cause, not at effect, but at cause, you have the view of God. When you absolutely affirm reality, not relatively, but absolutely affirm reality as it is and as it is not, you have the cosmic vista. So what happens is that now you become the cause of everything. So you have chosen, in that sense, you have chosen your past as it is, as it was. You see your life from that perspective. And this new consciousness that contains the trans-ecological mind is at the level of the cause, which means it is the originary awareness. It's not the, today's consciousness is consciousness of things. So consciousness has an object, and every object that comes into existence in consciousness is the effect. Consciousness is not conscious of the cause. And the consciousness itself, you can say it is an effect. But the new consciousness is the causation. You are originating that which is in your consciousness. Another way of saying this is you are in the constant state of absolute affirmation of reality. Within that absolute affirmation, you deny something, of course. You deny things that are inconducive to the movement of evolution. But nothing is static. Same thing can be conducive, or something can be inconducive, depending on the context. And with this being at cause, you reconnect and reintegrate with nature. Again, inner and outer. So Lao Tzu's message for humanity, Taoist message for humanity, return to nature. You return to nature by returning to the causation That is consciousness. And you return to nature. So you will start the trans-ecological humans will have different kind of relationship to nature, which is different from the people in the primitive society. Absolutely not. But you have a relationship to nature, within which culture exists, within which mind exists, within which language exists. But you are related to something beyond language, beyond mind. You are related to, actually you are at one with the causation itself, which is taking place at every moment. One more thing, when you are in that space, you become homo ludens, the man, the human, the player. And then your life becomes the cosmic lila, play. Just like a child play seriously, we begin to play seriously. Nietzsche has never articulated what kind of being that Übermensch is. But I'm now articulating what the Übermensch, Overman is. So another way of saying you become Homo Deus, divine man, yourself. So when you're playing, kids learn through playing. So you begin to learn. Learning become playing, and playing become learning. And we begin to unleash our imagination and creativity as a result. So we will move from the age of reason to age of imagination. So the new civilization of which I spoke during the last session is a very prayerful civilization. It contains the age of reason, but beyond that is an age of imagination and age of spiritual evolution. And so maybe we can kind of pause and before I go into healing aspects of this.
Sure. So I want to highlight one point. You talked about Nietzsche and the progression between camel, lion, and the child, and then the growth of the child. Now you're talking about playing like a child, but seriously on the largest scale possible. I know Jacob Bronowski talks about the longest childhood as being the hallmark of man. Mm-hmm. So this idea of child is crucial to this thinking. So can you speak a little bit more about it before we go on?
Okay. So it is interesting because in your model that you developed for Bhagavad Gita and now for everything, at the core is Brahman as a child, pure innocence. And Nietzsche's transformation, three transformation from camel to lion to child. And so camel say yes to the tradition and carry the burden of tradition. Lion says no to the burden of tradition and challenge the dragon, which is a representative of all of the human past. Then child again say sacred yes, in my case, absolute yes. And it's beautiful because child is, Jesus talks about becoming childlike. It is different from childish. And when your mind is become free from programming, you regain pristine innocence. And trans-ecological humans, although he or she will have great deal of knowledge, at core, he or she is always a child. And child is what child does. He or she grows. So Übermensch or trans-ecological humans are not the end product. It is a sage child. Don't you think that, don't you, I personally, sometimes have, God, I wish I'm not that, extremely wise or anything, but, I have more wisdom than when I was 20 years old. That's for sure. I wish I could go back to like 10 years old with what all we know. Don't you think? Sometimes I think about that, wow. God, how stupid I have been when I was 10 years old, 20 years old, even 30, 40 years old. God, stupid.
Wonderful.
So, it is a neutral. So that is a child, yeah? And if we can be reborn into being child in this life, at any age, you have somehow entered the stream of evolution, which is a life of Übermensch, Overman, which is a child.
Thank you.
Yes. So the title of this presentation, I said healing of the self and healing the world. Why it is so important is this. So diseased organism cannot evolve. Only healthy organism can evolve. So when illness takes place, what body is interested in is healing. When it is healed, it can grow and develop into the next stage of development. So it's only wholeness unfold into a greater wholeness. And moving from egological mind or egological consciousness to trans-ecological mind and trans-ecological consciousness, become Übermensch and become a child, which is a state of wholeness. We need to heal ourselves individually and collectively. And those who are not healed, fragmented, diseased, alien, and suffering are not able to evolve. They become preoccupied with their own illness and how to deal with it. And that's where I want to look at today's world. And most people's consciousness and mind are fragmented and to a degree diseased. More so than maybe the past. Is one aspect of the breakdown of the egological mind. And Spinoza, another favorite philosopher of mine, says this: the supreme mystery of tyranny, its prop and stay, is to keep man in a state of deception and with the specious title of religion or ideology, in our case, to cloak, to conceal this fear by which they must be held in check so that they will fight for their servitude as if for salvation. Another essential element of egological mind is that pattern of self-deception is internalized. There is a mechanism of self-deception embedded in the egological mind, so that we can be deceived by the external authority. I was listening to a lecture of well-known political scientist, and he studied lies the government tell. And he realized that, of course, there are the lies the United States tells Russia, and Russia tells lies. So there's a lie. But the biggest lie and the most prominent lie that government tell is fear-mongering of their own citizens, which means they terrorize their own people. But if there is no fear and self-deceptive pattern in the psyche and mind of people, government, external authority cannot deceive them. So the pattern of self-deception is built into the structure of the ego. And the breakdown of the egological mind has taken place in part because the human people became aware of the deception into which they bought. When you read Nietzsche's genealogy of morality, he goes so deep into one deception. Christian morality. How people have been deceived by Christianity, not by the Christ. He has never been anti-Christ, although he called himself anti-Christ in one of the books. He has been pro-Christ, anti-Christianity, the negative aspect of anti-Christianity, which was not originated by the Christ himself. When you read the Bible, you have to really pick Christ's teaching and its distortion. Is a very odious task. But anyway, so the reign of tyranny succeeds only through might, force, and violence, physical and psychological violence. So under tyranny, people become physically and psychologically violated, and therefore wounded, damaged, and traumatized. And in the last 150 years, the academia and media have gradually weaponized to serve the purpose of devolution of humans, not evolution. Enslavement, not freedom. The egological self-structure that develops as a part of mimetic operating system is designed to serve the external authority, society, devolution, not the evolution of consciousness and society, consciousness of individual. So using ego as a verb, to ego is to suffer, because to ego is to be unfree, to be controlled through social programming and conditioning. So the spiritual evolution has always been a trans-ecological movement in and toward freedom. But now what is happening today in a trans-ecological movement in which you and I are involved is not only become spiritually enlightened in the way that the ancient masters talked about, but actually transcending the egological mind itself completely and creating a new kind of mind. So ancient teachings, they transcended the egological mind, but they used the egological language and spoke to the people who are confined in the egological mind. There was nothing else was assumed there. Today, we are not only egologically, trans-egologically moving spiritually, so become aware of it, but also we are creating new mind, new consciousness, and therefore new language and new model. So it is rare I use ancient scriptures. The course you are taking is like an exception. I use the Shobo Genzo, and then I normally use the writing from 19th to 20th century, now 21st century, because those people have the mind that we have. So what is necessary for all of us, and especially us as a kind of a on the leading edge of human evolution? Don't be humble. Be bold and really take responsibility for your being on the leading edge. If you are not, you won't be listening to something like this. What we need to do, which I briefly touched upon many times actually, is question everything and encourage people to question everything. Everything that you have believed to be true. And the reason why I consider Nietzsche to be the most significant philosopher of the last 20th century is he is maybe the first to actually made it his job as a philosopher to ask questions and encourage people to ask questions and invite people to ask questions and define philosophy as an activity of asking questions. He had about 200 years of a time frame in which his message will be actually understood. In the past, I read or sometimes listened to academic discourse on Nietzsche and some great lectures, but they miss one thing. Nietzsche was a mystic. I have no question that he had gone through a real transformational process between the age of 35 to 42. And the amount of energy that he carried through this transformation. He was a very sickly man, couldn't take it, simply could not hold it. So it is a tragic example of untimely enlightenment. He got enlightened way too early. in the Western tradition. So this is what he called the transvariation. You know, you not only reevaluate everything that you have believed to be the case or true. You question the way you evaluate anything. So you rethink and reevaluate ideas and beliefs that you have. Also, you want to rethink and reevaluate your way of thinking and evaluating without going mad like he did. And the most important question in this area, especially going from this perspective, going from egological mind to trans-ecological mind, is to ask this question: who am I? Most people think, as the ecological mind has the metaphor me, there's a constellation of floating identities and society of personalities. We think we know who we are. But when very few people actually can even ask this question, who am I? Because when they are asking who am I, the I in the context of society, the authentic question with respect to who am I come into being when the I is seen in the context of the universe or nature, actually. You know, when you're asking who am I, want to really examine that question itself. Who is asking that question? And it is usually ego, or ego takes over. So if one can ask this question, who am I, authentically, it is actually an achievement. Only child can ask that question. Child, Nietzschean child. So, as I stated, last 3,000 years, human developmental history has been the egological movement, individually and collectively. And we have been in egological movement by virtue of being born into this human society with egological parents, egological teachers, and egological society. And this ego logic is mimetic operating system programmed into the human mind that conditions and direct our thought, cognition, will, emotion, and action. This mimetic operating system is superimposed upon the innate mental operating system with which we each is born, with a unique individual design potential. So our mind is not only conditioned to believe some ideas and values, but also programmed to think in a certain way, so that we are almost completely enslaved mentally. The ego is the internalized society or collective with the society of personalities or the constellation of floating identities, and exists for the sake of the society, not for the sake of individual. So when you begin to move in the direction of authenticity and the evolution, your mind will say something and go back. It is designed so that you don't stand out. Even if you stand out, in a way it is allowed to stand out by society. And people have this innate fear of ostracism. So they go back. It's called herd mentality, hive mentality. So the human ego is a collectivist psychologically as well as ideologically. And people individuate themselves superficially as psychological collectives. So the authentic individuality is rare. So so Übermensch is an authentic cosmic individual. So we want to move in that direction ourselves and guide our friends and especially our children in that direction. Also, this is another way of saying is you free yourself from this ideological and psychological collectivism, but also egalitarianism. One of maybe the fatal mistake that the founding father made is the sentence, all men are created equal. You and I know, after having studied their philosophy, we know what they meant. But they did not really clarify. They didn't put any annotation what they meant. And in the French Revolution, the equality became the major pillar of French Revolution philosophy. But truth is, nobody is born equal. And nobody develops equally, and which is good. We are different. And because of this egalitarian collectivist things, we tend to actually sympathize people who are on the lower, losers, weak. You have a compassion, pity in this. And we actually go against people who are strong. That's one of the slave mentality, feature of slave mentality that Nietzsche talks about. We want everybody to become great. And it is possible to create a educational system in which people can become the best version of themselves. But even then, they are different. Some are smarter than the others. Some are more creative than the others. And in order for us to create a new kind of civilization, we need to appreciate and nurture and enable the development of individual differences, so that Beethoven may be Beethoven, Mozart be Mozart. You don't want them to compose the same music. So in today's society, there's a mental tyranny has already occurred through education and the media, where people has become last man. And any philosophy, any teaching that encourages people to move in the direction of Übermensch, overman, is squashed. It goes against slave morality and pervading conspiracy for mediocrity. So today, we can make a fundamental shift philosophically, appreciating individuals and the individual differences. And moving away from this egalitarian conspiracy for mediocrity. and cherish everyone's greatness. And that greatness only happens when each person develops into the best version of himself or herself. That is different from you and me. And imagine when the 7 billion people, or let's say billions of people, allowed to be who they are and develop. There's a society, there's really a possibility that is available for human will be mind-boggling. Buddha and Christ, Gurujev and Aurobindo, all those great people who look like just monkeys against humans. Entirely different kind of human will be possible. And you and I, today living here, we are bridge, tightrope workers. We want to make sure we don't fall. Regardless of the obstruction that comes from the other side, you must make sure you go all the way to the end, which is your death. But don't die falling from the tightrope. So the last part may be a little controversial, but you know, this is, to me, after 30, 40 years of dealing with this issue, it is essential for people to have adopt different kind of philosophy. So maybe I can stop here.
Wonderful. Thank you, Yasuhiko. This was wonderful. Folks, it's time for questions. We want to get questions. Go ahead and type an exclamation mark. Keep your questions brief. And you can either type a exclamation mark in chat or raise your hand in Zoom. Go ahead and line up for questions and we will get started. We're going to start with Evanik. Evanik, go ahead.
Okay, so I'll ask one question, and if I have time, I'll ask more. But the first question is, when you were talking about Nietzsche and the choice in being the camel, the lion, or the child, and you were saying that the camel is the one that accepts tradition and it's kind of mediocrity. So my question is this a choice, or is this something that one just drifts into?
Okay. In one sense, by virtue of being born into society, you become a camel. In one sense, because you know you carry a tradition. But there's another way, and then most people, it's like a pre-camel camel, and some camels make the commitment to really master the tradition. Then what happens? Move in the direction of becoming a lion. And so camels that are the natural state of camels, humans being born into this, usually just remain a camel. And that is what Nietzsche calls the last man. Those who conspire for mediocrity and don't want to suffer too much and try to enjoy their lives, and they just keep away from the controversy and just have a nice middle class life. I'm not putting down on the economical sense. It is more like a mediocrity sense. And there are camels who commit themselves to really carry as heavy a load as possible. So I went through extremely rigorous training and education to become a Buddhist priest. That is a tradition. Sometimes 11 or 12 hours of meditation a day, and reading many different scriptures, studying Buddhist logic. That's a rigorous 5 years of academic and physical training. So I intentionally became a camel, you can say. I had some kind of spiritual experience before, and then chose that path. But then I said no to Zen, no to Buddhism, actually no to all of the traditional teachings. Before I begin to teach as a child. So there are two kinds of camels. The camels that just stay being a camel, never move into lions or in child, and the camels that really take it seriously being a camel and move forward. The same with lions. Some people just stay in a lion stage, never go into child. Today, after the movie Matrix, there's a term, red pill. Oh, I'm red pilled. They're just lions. So, now they're against, or they used to believe in the government. Now they don't believe in anything. They don't believe in the government, but they're anti-mainstream. Yeah? But they don't have, are you for? So red pill is not enough. You have to move on to next stage.
Thank you. Next up is going to be Shefali, Rupali, Evanik, David, and Elena. Shefali, go ahead.
Thank you. So, we live in this world where, we have so many constraints, and you've said that that's a lie, right? How do we evolve? How do we continue to evolve from an egological mind to a trans, where we are not one of the people who are around us, and we are better than the best versions of ourselves?
Yes.
How do we do that?
So you can actually consciously, intentionally start this process, really. And probably you have already started. That's why you're here. Now, as I said, so many ideas and beliefs, ideas that you take for granted to be true, you want to consciously start asking, questioning. I used to do a very involved program, and they go through 3 years of a process. And what they do, they re-examine the assumptions they hold. So they don't normally question the assumptions, but now, first you have to become aware of your assumptions. Then say, is it really true? The many things we assume, some are maybe true, but some are not. So I'm not so you always need to have some assumptions to live your life, but you can actually question those assumptions. So that's, and for example, when you are, I miss your name, but ask who you are. Initial response will be, well, I'm of Indian origin, I'm a woman, I'm young and beautiful, I'm intelligent, and all those things come into your mind. That's an attribute of your ego. Yes? And those things you don't need to question. You are beautiful, you are intelligent, so that's okay. That's, your assumption is correct there. But but then you will hold assumption like I am a good person. Most people think they're a good person. Okay, so I'm a good person. Okay, but when I say good person, what do I mean by good? What constitutes goodness? That constitutes my goodness. And then say, what? So you have a belief about goodness and badness. So you want to question that, and you see, and most of the belief and idea we have really foundationless. we somehow bought into it. Not just you, everybody. And one of the ideas that is breaking down today globally, it used to be that it is better to have college education than high school education. It is better to have a master's degree than not only bachelor's degree. It used to be that having PhD is better than just master's degree. And it is better to have a PhD from IIT than some other university. So smart people like Shrikant work very hard at getting the degree in the IIT. Then what? But today, really, this assumption is breaking down already today, in particular field anyway. And some kids, 18-year-old kid with computer is better than somebody who finished IIT, and they get hired. So what's the point in going to IIT? Same as many fields. Of course, you want to go to a medical school. You don't want to go to see a doctor who hasn't gone to medical school. But so anyway, so you want to ask this question. Really, every day, make it a point to really ask this question. That it means to be a philosopher, to question the assumptions.
Wonderful. Next up is Rupali. Rupali, go ahead.
Thank you, Yasuhiko. I am just absolutely, every single word was immensely powerful. I have a couple of questions. One, that you talked about, primitive people and the modern people and how our relationship with nature is. Could you elaborate on that? And the second question I have is the question about who am I? So I'm a Montessori educator, and that is the core of Montessori education is who am I? And so all the education is around the question, who am I? And children by middle school are part of a valorized program where they become part of society and they participate in society and are seeking the answer to who am I? Yes. So as an educator, what guidance would you give me for kind of leading students in that discovery of who they are?
Rupali, it's so nice to see you again, because I missed it actually for the last few sessions, and excellent questions. So
here going forward.
Yes. So the second question first. So as I said, being able to ask this question, who am I, is actually an achievement. Although people think they ask these questions, and they do ask these questions, usually it is not an authentic in the sense of it is still a part of the programming. It is like Plato's Socratic dialogue. I don't remember which one. You come to the point of I don't know. So to ask this question, who am I? You come to the point of, I really don't know, who am I? And not knowing, who am I? Experiencing this not knowing is the beginning of asking this question. And it is much deeper than who am I in the sense, well, I'm an educator, I'm Indian, I'm a woman, so on and so forth. Those are all predicate. It is nothing to do with you in a complete sense. So it is a predicate, not the predicate. The I that has never been predicated shows up for the first time when you really come to know, you really don't know who you are. And funny thing about, should I say this? Yeah, maybe I should say this. But I would like you to forget this. Once you begin to ask this question, there is no answer. It is like You see, in a way, you are asking what is infinite. And you enter into the infinity, and it's like there will be a kind of some aspect of you show up. Actually, you become who you are by asking this question. That quest is the realization of who you are. And that's, to me, what it means to live real spiritual evolution in a way. So any predicate you come up with is not you. But at the same time, not like a Hindu or Japanese Buddhist, I wouldn't say no either. It is an aspect of you, absolutely. But it is not you. So it is an infinity unfolding in you, and you see some aspect of it. And you cannot really articulate it in language. But when you listen to Bach's or Beethoven's or Mozart's music, Beethoven is showing you who he is. Every piece of his music is his expression of an aspect of this unique infinity that who he is. And look, how many music he composed. That's all aspect of him. And if he lived another 50 years, he would have produced same number or even more of compositions. What was your first question?
So I'll just comment a little bit on this. What you just said about Beethoven's music, it reminded me of a recent conversation from Vibhuti Yoga of Bhagavad Gita, where there are so many manifestations, yet to see the supreme is very difficult.
Yes.
And so I think it goes back to that, where, yes, who am I? You're always on that quest and that journey, but you manifest who you are with the actions, with the karma yoga, right?
Yeah, and in different ways. And I think that's when you actually forget your own ego, right?
Yeah, great. Beautiful. Yes. Yeah. You see, it's funny thing is, Shrikan's model, you go all the way to the pristine innocence of Brahman or Supreme. The deeper you go, greater the universe. It's almost like and when you get to the 0 point, it is infinite at the same time.
Yes.
And then you are completely speechless. Completely speechless. Or you can talk forever. Either way. So yes. So it is like definitely the distance disappears completely. So you are at one with it. At the same time, you are speechless. You cannot really say anything about that. But everything you say is not it. And everything you don't say is not it.
Right. Thank you. Next up is...
I think the first question was also very important, but I don't remember.
Go ahead, Rupali. First question.
Okay, the first question was, how is the relationship of the primitive people compared to our current relationship with nature?
Okay, I'll give you a very basic example. Most of us living in this civilized so-called society in city, very few people have actually experienced real hunger. And periodically I do fasting twice a year, 10, 12 days. Then you realize what hunger is. When you fast 69 days like Mahatma Gandhi, I think you even lose that sense. So at a certain point, you really know what hunger is, yes. And second, you live in a society and you have a daily schedule. So you have to go to college and you have to be at the class at 9 o'clock. And it takes 15 minutes to get there. And then it takes about 1.5 hours to, put your makeup on. And then you have to eat something. So time is all scheduled, yes? Your body may not be hungry, but if you don't eat now, you'll get hungry in the future, so you'll eat. Second. Number 3, what your body wants and what you are eating may not be the same. So I was born in Japan, and I grew up with Japanese food, obviously. And I was a very sickly child. I have been sick all the way. Because I'm allergic to soybeans and to the lesser degree, rice. And somebody who is allergic to soybeans and rice living in Japan, you are bound to be sick. I never liked soybeans, by the way. Tofu. Ugh. And if you're born in the United States, you eat bacon and egg every morning. It doesn't make any sense. You see, so we don't listen to our body. And body is far more intelligent than our medical science. It knows exactly what it needs. So if we don't listen to our body and we eat food based on even people who go into diet, they enforce particular diet on one body. It is not healthy. So in the most basics of the eating, we are so far removed from nature. Also, when Newton and Galileo or Copernicus or Giordano Bruno, when they are doing science, they look at the nature. Today, when they do physics, they look into computer. Nature has become abstraction. So in everything we do, we are one step removed from this. You see, conceptualization, this ability is extremely important for humans. And it is, the greater your mind, the better at conceptualization. Nothing wrong with this, but not at the cost of losing the sensitivity and sensibility of your perception and sensation.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Yasuhiko. Next up is going to be David, Elena, Brian, Jonathan, Angela, and Evanique. David, go ahead.
Yes, thanks, Shrikant. Thanks, Yasuhiko. So my question is, in this question you're saying about understanding ourselves, right? Who am I? And this spectrum you're talking about, of the camel to lion to child, where would someone who's malevolent fit into that, or someone who's a psychopath? Because a person can be malevolent and understand themselves and know who they are. So is that orthogonal to this, or is that sort of off the scale? How does that type of personality integrate into your scale?
Very good question. I think they can go through the process of camel and even lion, but I don't think they can ever become a child, number one. And I elaborate on this. You see, the load that camel carries, although it is socially conditioned, there's a certain typology of camels that is consonant with the kind of load they can carry. So in the first probably 5 to 7 years of human growth, assuming that somebody is born psychopath who is not wired in the same way that the rest of humans are, it will kind of selection process can both, the one who is carrying, oh, this is too heavy. So in the first 7 years of a person's life, it pretty much the kind of load that he or she can carry is determined. So everybody will go through that process, whether you're normal or psychopathological. And the psychopaths, some of them may even go into the lion stage and start to say no. But still, it will never reach to the level of child. The difference between lion and child, there's a number of differences. Number one is that the lion is reactive. Child is active. And lion is at effect. Child is at cause. And by virtue of being psychopath, he or she is wired to be only reactive. And they know, they can understand this force of reaction so well that they use it to control and dominate other human beings. But most psychopaths will stay in the camel stage. That's my sense of it. I would love to have this conversation with a psychologist who knows those things better than me, who also knows Nietzsche, and I would love to discuss this more. Good question, very good question.
Wonderful. Next up is going to be Elena. Elena, go ahead. Elena, could you go ahead?
Yes, I'm here, and I just had to rejoin. Good morning, everyone. My question, Yasuhiko, is going to the book you mentioned and the work of Julian Jaynes, right? So what he's saying, I just looked him up. He's saying that the consciousness itself develops based of metaphorical language and all the concepts arising. So it's not given the consciousness. So then he's speaking about the bicameral mind.
Elena, you
what
can ask
what is that?
Yeah, go ahead and ask any question. You want to know what bicameral mind is?
Yes, and why is that? So what Julian Jaynes is saying, that the consciousness is being developed based on metaphorical language, the use of language. Therefore, are we not born with consciousness, and it has to develop, or it has to be unlocked? So what's Yasuhiko's position on the view of that, on that? Thank you.
Okay, there are two aspects to Julian Jaynes' hypothesis. One is his analysis of what we call consciousness today. And his analysis of consciousness, I'm completely alignment. And I mentioned the 6 features that constitute the design of consciousness. I don't need to repeat at this moment. Time is short. But he has a hypothesis that 3,000 years ago or before, humans had a different mode of consciousness, which he calls bicameral mind. And about this hypothesis, I don't know if it's true or not. And I think people are still studying, I think, verifying or falsifying this hypothesis. And this old mode of consciousness, he describes that one hemisphere of the brain, usually right brain, is a repository of culture and tradition. It has a language, of course. And then in human operation, the right brain basically actually dictate to the left brain what to do. And left brain heard the right brain's speech as God speaking. So it is not like a metaphor or analogy. It was literally, they heard the voice of God. And that is a bicameral mind. And today, some people hear the voice of God, but normal humans don't hear the voice of God, but they actually go through the cognitive process. And that's the difference. And I found his hypothesis to be extremely interesting. But I haven't spent my time actually verifying or falsifying his theory.
Thank you, Yasuhiko. So Elena and everybody else, we have spent a lot of time looking at Julian Jaynes' ideas. There's more than 30 meetups we have done on it. I would recommend starting with the meetups I've done with Brian McVeigh on the core ideas, core concepts of Julian Jaynes. So if you go to the YouTube channel, 52 Living Ideas, you will find them there. Next up is going to be Penny. Penny, go ahead.
Okay. My question was, when you were talking about the trans-ecological mind and thought, and you were saying that it was causative at cause, that was like a new consciousness, like previously it was more effect oriented, but now it would be cause and like a return to the Tao. Could you explain a little bit more what you were meaning by that?
Okay, so consciousness is not the mind. Consciousness contains a mind. And just, our conversation is about new consciousness and new mind. I use the Julian Jaynes title, The Origin of Consciousness, which is an egological consciousness. In the breakdown of the bicameral mind, I said the origin of new consciousness in the breakdown of the egological mind. And so egological mind, as I say, it has a logic of the ego, and there's a number of elements. And trans-ecological mind transcend and include that ecological mind. And when in the process of developing this trans-ecological mind, consciousness also expands and deepens, or it become a greater whole. The nature of consciousness also shifts qualitatively. And one is the entire spectrum of human intelligence not only become available, but also become integrated. Informational, intellective, intuitive, imaginative, and spiritual. And so it is a holistic mind as opposed to a very fragmented mind. And second is, it's very difficult to communicate this, but right now, everything that is in your consciousness visible and invisible, like a concept, are effect of something. It is manifested. So consciousness is conscious of effect. And scientists or philosophers too study the effect, which we call phenomena. Now, new mode of consciousness that is about to emerge in a larger scale is actually aware of causative dimension in the sense of originating it. So you didn't create the universe, obviously. You're an effect of creation in one sense. But your consciousness can go embrace the causative dimension. And what happens is this. You see the universe in the way God would see it. You have a cosmic vista of creation, not from the perspective of effect alone, but from the place of creator. You don't create them, but you can see the universe from a creator perspective. Another way of saying it, the easier way to get to this is actually absolute affirmation of reality as it is. When you completely 100% plus affirm reality as it is. Everything that happened in the whole history of the universe, all the way to today, whole history of humanity, whole history of your people, and whole history of you, 100% affirmation. Then you have a different perspective to this, your life and to the universe. Again, it is a causative dimension, causative perspective. It is a cosmic vista. Then this is what Nietzsche meant by amor fati, love of fate, and being able to accept eternal recurrence of your life. You affirm 100% more. Within that, in daily living, you say yes and no, relative. But your life is absolutely affirmed by you. And that is the different kind of consciousness. It is really originally awareness. And that is new mode of consciousness experienced by some people in the past. It is available for most humans. And in the process of bringing this trans-paradigmatic mind into its fold, it is bound to become causative. Because of this, if when you are able to actually understand life from different paradigm, you need to immerse yourself ontologically. Your being must be in that paradigm. That can be only done going through the causative dimension. You can't enter effectively. You can only enter causatively. So being able to be trans-paradigmatic, you need to be causative. For this reason, the development of trans-paradigmatic mind, trans-ecological mind, will go along with this new consciousness that will contain the cause.
Wonderful.
So that's what I meant.
Wonderful, thank you. Next up is going to be Jonathan. Jonathan, go ahead.
Hello. Yeah, wonderful talk. Have been some of the things you're talking about are things that sort of I've been pondering in the recent times, particularly around healing and change in these modern times. I have a couple of suppositions that I want to maybe track with what you're saying, and then I have a question. So maybe if I could go to the suppositions, and then you can confirm whether these track with what you're thinking, and then onto the questions. So I think maybe history can be seen as a series of paradigms, so that societies use in order to have a collective conscious, right? And societies too are a function of how far and well they can communicate. So in ancient, pre-modern times, it was how far the fastest person could run, right? It was sort of a function of how far your society could get. And in Middle Age times, it was sort of like how far the fastest horse could go, right? And when the empires got too big, like the Roman Empire, they grew out, they outgrew their means to communicate. And then they would ossify, collapse, and then there would be a reintegration, right? A rehealing. And that rehealing is basically the disintegration of one paradigm to a more fundamental structure, and then then a new paradigm sort of coming in its place, right? Fast forward to today, it seems as if we're going through another phase of ossification of old paradigms, either disintegration or rupture of the existing structures, many different structures, and the let's say pain and suffering that is a result of those things. And it's not clear how far we are along in this process, but it seems to be on a global scale, because now we can communicate globally, right? I can talk to someone in Australia instantly. Someone in Australia maybe even on this call, I don't know. But our means of communication, right, has outgrown our wisdom with which we can do that communication well, right? And that disconnect, and that plus the existing paradigms are causing it to collapse. And the healing with which I think you are concerned with is the process of that disintegration that we all have to face both individually and collectively, and healing to form what may be yet another paradigm, right? And on and on and on. And I just wanted to, so first question, how much of that tracks with what you're thinking? And the second question is, if I can get it up.
All your questions on the table, and then let Yasuhiko, beautifully put, go ahead, put all your questions on the table.
Okay, the second question is, how do we
looks like there is a internet
disintegration and healing? Because I feel like much of the suffering in the world is people either being too far out in front of the paradigm, like for instance, Nietzsche was a genius. He sort of saw the 20th century before, 100 years before anyone else, and he went crazy. Maybe there needs to be a Nietzsche, but there's also people who are camels, who are gonna, maybe some people can be camels, but some people are just, they're ruining, they're just putting themselves in tremendous suffering because they've signed on to some paradigm or some ideology that they cannot fathom. So that's my question based on that supposition. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Okay, so I suggested that people read an essay I wrote in 2017, Healing the Self and Healing the World. And I talked about healing as a function of communication. And Nicholas Luhmann, who is a great sociologist, says that unit of society is not people, but communication. And communication has a structure, which he calls a system, 3 essential components to communication. If those 3 components are not available, there's no communication. One is utterance, speaking. Second is information. Third is understanding. Now, anybody who have done any communication realize how difficult it is to understand or to be understood. And in any scale of society, understanding is rare, actually. We think we understand. We believe we understand. Because most people programmed into the same belief system that they already know what other person is saying. It is like a part of the belief system, and somebody speaking same language is already in the structure of belief, so they understand. But somebody who has a different paradigm, there is no understanding whatsoever. And today, because of this globalization, the trans-paradigmatic communication is happening all the time. So what happens is people don't understand. There is no global society there. The unit of society is already doesn't exist. They appear as if they are talking. Even when they disagree, they're not really disagreeing, because one is saying this and then one is saying this thing, and what he said is understood in his own way, not the way he is saying, vice versa. So you are actually disagreeing with yourself. So that's number one. So healing in every level is a restoration of communication, which I call the semiotic integrity. So when you study biosemiotic, biology, there is a ongoing signal exchange. There is a communication, brains connected to everything, and the ongoing communication going on. When you eat, eating is also kind of communication, ongoing biosemiotic communication. Yes, so chemical, from the subatomic to chemical, biological, there's an ongoing semiotic exchange. So when this integrity of this is broken, the system becomes ill. Then we go all the way to human society. So people who are actually some have illness in their system, communication breakdown somewhere, biological, psychological. In the future, probably we don't need to have any unconscious. You may have subconscious and then conscious, but not unconscious. Unconscious is usually created by rejection. You can't take it, so you put it. So, and then many of the diseases, physical diseases, even like a back pain, is psychosomatic. And it is attention deviation. When you have a real problem, psychological problem, you are not able to, it is unconscious, and you are not able to deal with it. And what happens? And then also, you don't want to deal with it, actually. So your psychosomatic system created something like backache, and your attention goes all the way to backache. Real problem is psychogenic, but appearance is physical. So there's so much of this disintegration of semiotic integrity. Number two, understanding. That is an essential component of communication, is against most people's experience, extremely rare. So now, Jonathan asked me questions, but Jonathan's experience, I don't experience. So when I say, I understand, he is not experiencing my experience. So how does he know I understand the vice versa? Well, so understanding of somebody else's, the other person cannot experience yourself. And you cannot experience other person's experience. So therefore, understanding is not as easy as we think it is. And Roger Penrose, famous mathematician and physicist, wrote some interesting books on consciousness. And he thinks that consciousness is not computational process. Most AI scientists believe that consciousness is computational. So they assume that that is the case. So they ask the question, what kind of computational process consciousness is? That's their question. But Penrose thinks that the consciousness has an element that is not computational. And he calls that element understanding. So understanding is a unique feature of human consciousness, which he thinks that the artificial intelligence can never have. So how difficult it is, really, to have this understanding. So this can be a one session. We can spend 2 hours with this. So just want to say that, understand, most people are not even aware how rare understanding is. And since understanding is rare, communication is rare, which means unit of society is already broken down. Second, what is information? Gregory Bateson defines information as the difference that makes the difference. So, what is it? Information has value if actually it makes a difference. And most of the time when we have conversations in which we think we understand each other, the information interchanged doesn't make any difference. Two people who are programmed into the same belief system having a conversation, and they call this speaking, understanding the information. If you stay in this paradigm, there's no real communication taking place. No information that moves the system forward is exchanged, and no real understanding, which is not a computational process, is taking place. So we are in such a mess today. So just like asking the question, who am I? We really want to start to observe the lack of communication, lack of understanding, and lack of real information. And this is another way of saying humans are in a deep trance. We are in a deep dream state. And only when somebody is hypnotized like this, our power structure can hypnotize us. A awake person cannot be hypnotized.
Wonderful.
So we need to be a lion and saying, no, I don't want to be like this. Really.
Wonderful. Thank you, Yasuhiko. We have run out of time. So what we're going to do, folks, we'll wrap up in a minute, but I want to tell you that immediately after this, I'm going to give a preview of what we are doing tomorrow. And coincidentally, it's on the same topic. It's Louis Sullivan talking about face-to-face. He's saying that the entire world is dominated by this feudal, he calls it the feudal self.
Yes.
And it's all about the entire essay that I'm going to be reading is going to be on coming face-to-face with your true self, with all its dynamism. So I'm going to give a quick preview of this immediately after this. So Yasuhiko, would you like to say anything in conclusion?
You know, I had some quote I wanted to read, but I think in the interest of time, I will do it next time. I highly recommend if you read the essay that I suggested, Healing the Self, Healing the World. There are many things that I wanted to say, which I couldn't say, including this particular quote.
Wonderful.
Yes,
Folks, I have put the link in the chat right now.
yeah, exactly.
And just click on it and go for it.
Yes.
All right, Yasuhiko.
So thank you very much.
Thank you very much.